Which brings me to Ms. Bonnie Yates, who's joining us right now from Tollner Law Offices. She is an amazing special education attorney, and she is joining us to talk more about the basics of special education. Bonnie, good morning.
Good morning, Shannon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I feel compelled to say this might be my most interesting, what do you call it, background in
I
a
was going
long
to
time.
say, you got it
But,
going on today.
well, basically, I really do because we're remodeling our house and living in the garage till some of it is done. So you've got all kinds of fun things in the background, like my stove that's covered with a sheet and
I love
all the
it.
painter tarp. Yeah, you love it because you are seeing it from afar, not waking up in it and trying to like make meals on a hot plate. And of
Oh, Bonnie. It's like
course
you're camping, but not even glamping. It's horrible.
it's like non-glamping. I tell people it's like camping out with but no beautiful nature. So
Is
I'm
it time to go on vacation, Bonnie?
It's supposed to be I don't know. But of course, since I'm camping with a guy who
Yes.
happens to be my husband, this is the guy that, like, his favorite thing is to almost run out of gas, but not run
Oh,
out of gas. So I think he thinks this is, like, very edgy.
yeah.
Anyway, yes.
So he's loving it.
No, I do have a hot shower, I'm very grateful for that, and I'm finding that I have to take a certain number of my meals out just sort of to get
Right.
away from all the grimies. But anyway, I'm grimy, but I'm happy to talk about special ed, and we were
So good.
working on, special education rights and responsibilities. I'm talking to you courtesy of Tollner Law Offices, who, employs me, luckily for me. We're a, large special education disability rights firm. We cover all of California and Arizona as well. And if you want to reach us, you can do so by going to our website, and you can fill in there's forms if you want an intake or consultation, and you're from California or Arizona. You can reach me by cell phone 310-245-1968. See, what else am I supposed to say? Okay, so these are your rights. These are not necessarily your answers to your specific legal questions, but your rights help you inform you when you analyze your own legal questions. But if you have a burning legal question, and who doesn't these days, um, I really recommend you have a consultation with an attorney in your own state. And to get started on that, you can go look at the list on www.copaa.net. That's the preamble. Where we left off last time is we're just doing this sort of like special education filibuster or whatever you want to call it. We talked a little bit last time about basic rights. Shannon asked, are these the rights that you're given at when they email your, let's say, IEP invitation to you or at the beginning of your meeting? And the answer is each district develops its packet, or its own governing rules as far as the parent rights. So the problem that I have with parent rights is they're oftentimes incomplete. The school district can kind of pick and choose what they want, and they run the risk if somebody is looking for something that's supposed to be there and it isn't there, of being challenged on it. But I just don't tend to see that particular issue coming up very much. But you know, if they offer you your parent rights in e-form, stick them in your special ed file. Might be worth having later on. So the first question in the special education rights and responsibilities, chapter one, is, I hear a lot about federal and state laws and federal and state regulations. What's the difference? And we talked about that federal law is something which was originally the source of the IDEA. It was enacted by the 94th Congress in 1975. I don't even imagine we could ever get approval or agreement for a comprehensive statutory scheme like this now. But in 1975, this the precursor was called the Education for Handicapped Children, for All Handicapped Children Act. It later turned into the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. And so, as part of that, if the states want to participate in the federal scheme of special education, um, they get federal money, but in exchange, they have to develop their own laws, and they have to sorry, there's a plane going over. They have to offer at least as many rights as the federal government does. What are regulations? Regulations are things that are enacted after the fact to kind of fill in holes that maybe weren't covered by the federal or state law. Regulations also can tell you how something is to be accomplished rather than just that something is illegal, right? So that's question one. Question two sounds as if it might be boring, but it's really not. It's what is the definition of special education? And this is important for you. This is all theoretical. This is intended to help you understand that there's a framework for all of this. You know, it's it's sort of like your ABA drill book. I mean, you really need this information, and then you can go to your IP team and you'll have a context for some of this stuff, and you'll be able to see whether the district is acting legally or not. Sometimes districts act illegally because um, they feel they need to act illegally. Other times districts act illegally because they don't know the law. But anyway, let's just read this paragraph on the definition of special education, and then we'll see if Shannon has any questions. So, special education means specially designed instruction at no cost to the parent to meet the unique needs of a child with disabilities. This instruction can include classroom instruction, home instruction, instruction in hospitals and institutions, instruction in other settings, and that's not further developed, and instruction in physical education. Special education also includes speech language pathology or any other related service if the service is considered special education under state standard. Travel training and vocational education, that's obviously for older students. Here's the example we were talking about earlier. California gives you something that the federal definition does not include. California adds to the federal definition of special education by requiring that special education be provided to those students with disabilities whose educational needs cannot be met with modification of the regular instructional program. So there's some key terms, and we're just going to go through them quickly. One is at no cost. Okay, and at no cost means at no cost. And I've had cases throughout the years where districts have actually, it's not that common, but they've said things like, we have this really good para educator and she moonlights as a tutor. So you can hire her to work with your special education student at home. So at no cost means that all specially designed instruction is provided without charge but does not preclude incidental fees that are normally charged to all students regardless of a disability. So if you had a football uniform that everybody had to pay for, that is not something that the IEP team has to exempt you from. They go on to talk about physical education, which is only interesting because the definition is much broader than you might think. It includes the development of physical and motor fitness, fundamental motor skills and pattern, and skills in aquatics, dance, and individual and group games and sports, including intramural and lifetime sports. The term also includes special physical education and adapted physical education, movement education, and motor development. Well, that's interesting because who among us has ever had any of those things except for adapted PE be part of our IEP? Specially designated instruction means adapting as appropriate to the needs of an eligible child. The content, methodology, or delivery of instruction to address the unique needs of the child that result from the child's disability and to ensure access of the child to the general curriculum so the child can meet the educational standards uh, that apply to all children. And then there's a definition for travel training and vocational training as well. But do you have any questions at this point, Shannon?
I gotta be honest, I'm just fascinated by all of this because I think there are so many things in there that people will go, "I didn't know that was included in there.
Yeah, and
I
one of
didn't know."
those was me, Shannon.
it's very, and I there are a couple of phrases that I'm hung up on. One of them was the phrase about um in- something about if they're not able to do the the accommodations to the curriculum, if they're not able to do them with modifications. Like that whole section was very interesting to me because what I've always been told is if modifications have to be done to the curriculum at all, that student becomes special education. But this sort of made it sound like it was might be possible to have modifications to the curriculum be outside of special ed. Did I hear that wrong?
Well, I think the way the law works is that if you go back to the beginning, there's a preference always in special education for the least restrictive environment, and the presumption is that the student will go into general ed unless he or she can't. And so, in order to allow access to the least restrictive environment, we give related services, accommodations, and modifications.
Yeah.
I don't believe those things are available to gen ed students without IEPs, but if a school wanted to, they could offer that. But I think the problem would be you're saying that the person passes the grade, but they really haven't met grade level standards.
Mm.
So that's one issue. Now, if you have a 504 plan, and some people do, 504 actually can include services. People don't know that, and you sure don't see people getting 504 services very often. But I think you could give accommodations, modifications, and services under 504. But
It's interesting. I didn't know that either.
basically, special education, my thought about it is the education of every child is really precious and unique, and it's wonderful to see a little person open up and start to learn about the world and see them integrate that into their way of living. I've always felt that what I would like is a society where every child's education was being governed by a plan that was developed at the beginning of the year. And I wish we could individualize for everyone, not just students with a 504
Yeah.
plan or students with disabilities. But since we have the ability to individualize for students with an IEP, that's why we want to know what we're potentially entitled to, so that we can come up with the best plan possible.
Yeah. I think people who watch the show know that I'm a former teacher, that I taught both college and then I went and taught after 9/11 in junior high and high school. And it was at a time when the political thought was there was no child left behind, but it was also there was this running theme of we want to have every single child get the exact same opportunity, which meant that I remember our principal saying to us, I want to be able to walk down the hallway and I want the doors open and all the people who are teaching sixth grade math, it will be as if I'm hearing a recording. And as I walk through the hallway, all the students are turning the same page at the same time. And of course, the teachers and the teachers union, we all lost our minds over it because we were like, where is the individualized education?
Yeah, it's very hard to move in this arena. Like, we had the issue in California at the beginning of the year where the AB whatever it is 104, I think, not AB 130, I think it's 104, said that for this year independent study would be available, and it specifically exempted special education students from participating in independent study. I thought, well, that's good because I don't want my kids to end up in independent study with no services. Whereas two law firms that I highly respect saw that as discriminatory or discrimination, and I think that they're right. They said, "How can you let everybody else have independent study and not make the option possible
Yeah,
for?" So we get into these situations where, like, is it good or is it bad? And it's always going to have to be. I think it's always going to have to be not cookie cutter, and look at the person and see what they need. I mean, I think that's what the
exactly.
law says. Um, but
Exactly.
but that does come up a lot. What one person wants, the other person thinks would be really the wrong thing for their child. The next question, which I know you guys are gonna love, is called "How can I get the school district to evaluate or assess my child?" And so you all know that when a child is initially referred to special education, there's supposed to be an assessment in all areas of disabilities. In order to have those assessments kind of delineate for us or identify for us what the unique needs of the child are, such that he requires special education and related services to access the curriculum. So let's see how they answered it. Okay, they started even before eligibility. They said, your school district has an obligation to identify, locate, and evaluate all children with disabilities who may be eligible for special education, including those who are attending private schools or homeless or wards of the court. This is called child find. So child find is important, and periodically we get a child find case. I was doing one this week where the young lady was very academically capable, but she was having very severe mental health symptoms. And the district kept telling the parents, yeah, well, we're going to evaluate her, but we're not allowed to yet because of the pandemic. We're waiting for appropriate PPE before we can assess people. And they didn't get around to actually assessing her until September 2020, even though her parents had been asking for her to be assessed for over a year. And so when the district overlooks a student like that, whether it's unintentionally or it's intentionally, that's a failure of their child find obligations, and it may result in the student being entitled to um, additional services, which we call compensatory services, to make up for the failure to properly and timely evaluate the child. That's child find.
And this is something that I wasn't aware of till you brought it up. I don't know, like 2 years ago. And I think a lot of people aren't aware. So I want to just back up for just a second and talk about this, because I think that a lot of time, having been on both sides of the equation, I've been a teacher in a classroom at a meeting talking about a student's behavior, and heard people say, I think this kid needs some extra support. And I've heard people say, don't go that way. Don't go that way. Don't go down that path. We don't have a right to say anything to the parent. You don't want to start that with the parent. We're not gonna open the Pandora's box to that. So it's shocking to me to now hear that we had a legal obligation to have that conversation and to refer that child. But on the other side, as a parent, I've also had the circumstance where I didn't know that teachers were sitting in around a room talking about my child and they didn't let me know. For parents that are watching that feel like probably a teacher did identify their child and that the school did nothing and nobody notified them, how would they go back now, Bonnie? Do they, obviously they would come to a lawyer like yourself, and how do you unveil all that to get to the point where they give money? Do you have to have written proof that they had identified the child and didn't tell?
I think every child find case is unique. I think that school districts don't like to keep emails from parents. They don't like to keep correspondence from parents. I want everyone in the audience to know that 99% of the time, when I get school district records, there are no emails, there are no student work samples, there's no data. So proving your child find issue is going to be different in different circumstances. In the case that I just mentioned, the young lady was the subject of multiple hospitalizations over and over again, psychological issues, very serious issues. And the parents were doing things like writing the district and saying, help, she's in the hospital, we need to get her homework. I mean, they got more informed, and then they got more specific. But really, at the moment that the school district is notified that a child is in a psychiatric hospital and is going to be there for an unknown amount of time, I think that triggers the duty to assess. A lot of the time, you have stuff come up in the classroom that the classroom teacher sees, and he or she would be the logical person to make the referral for the assessment. But in some districts, they're told, "You can't refer, don't do it." And so, but that's another natural place in the system where the breakdown can occur, because the teacher is clearly aware that the child is having problems, and that triggers a duty. There's a low threshold for when you have to assess. If you have a suspicion that the person has a disability, you have to do the assessment. So that's another point in the system. Um,
So
and then
let me ask this, and maybe this is a ridiculous question, but if we've had if we've had, like, let's say the child is in second grade, and in kindergarten and first grade we have all these notes that we've kept a record of, that they said, oh, your child engaged in this behavior, did it, and they start talking about what a problem your child is, maybe talking about expelling them. Is it reasonable for a lawyer to go back and go, you identified this many times, why did you not trigger child find?
Shannon, that's a great example. And it's also a great example of why you're so good at doing the show, which I was thinking about when I signed in this morning, but I'll save that for another point in time. But yes,
Good
um,
morning.
that would be a defense to a an attempt to remove the student from school via a manifestation determination. And that is one of the things that like, if you get a kid and they're about to be expelled and the district is planning on holding a manifestation determination, you could prepare for that manifestation determination by going in and saying, uh, you should have had a suspicion that the child had a disability. There's a provision in the law that deals with having a suspicion of having a disability. And if the child should have had an IEP in place and he didn't, and he's being suspended, that's going to be, a defense to um, any attempt to expel the student. If you have the IEP and they're trying to expel the student, then you get into other um, issues about, whether the district essentially did everything it could to try to follow the child's IEP, and nonetheless they still can't, manage or control his behavior. People don't get expelled that often, but if the audience is interested, at some time we could do a show about expulsion.
Yeah. Oddly enough, though, I think, Bonnie, while it doesn't happen that often, when it does happen, I think it's our families that are most in need of knowing what their rights are.
Well, that's a good point. So we could talk. I will talk about that sometime in the next few weeks. Going back to assessment, if we have more time, I don't know.
We've
If
got
you,
about 3 minutes. We've got two questions, Bonnie.
all right.
The first one, Laura just wrote in and said, how can we find a lawyer to support special education? There's a perfect question.
What state is she in?
Good question. Laura, what state are you in? Write in and tell us as quickly as you can. And then Sarah wrote in and said, our daughter attends public school and has a great team. However, during our last conference, it was noted that she is behind academically. We're now wondering if we should send her to a private special needs school. Is it possible to get the local school district to fund her education at a special needs school if she is not thriving in the current school environment? And Laura wrote back and said she's in Texas. Two different moms.
Well, okay, in Texas, why don't you go to COPA and look up? There's an attorney there, Martin Cirkiel, Cirkiel. He'd be a good person to talk to about your question. As far as whether the district can be required to pay for private or non-public schools instead of a public school placement, the answer to that is yes, because the district has to offer a continuum of options, starting with the least restrictive and ending with the most restrictive. So if your student can't make it in general education, there's a whole workup and analysis that we do, and a way that we set up a case in order to get the private education for the student. I would say the first thing you need to do if your student is struggling academically is, if there hasn't been a recent academic assessment, to ask for new assessments. in cognitive, in other words, psychology and academics. And then once you get those reports, either they're going to help you to get um, a better idea of why the child is struggling academically, or if the evaluations are not strong, you can take them to a lawyer, and that lawyer will help you write a letter to try to get your evaluations paid for at public expense. So, either way, go back and look and see when the last time your student was assessed. If it's been more than 2 years, you're not going to be able to attack that evaluation and try to get the district to pay for a private evaluation that's better. If all you will be able to do is either let the district um, reassess and then challenge their evaluation, or if you can afford to do it, you can kind of skip all those steps and instead you can go out and pay for a private evaluation, which will get you a lot of very valuable information. And then if you file a lawsuit against the district, you can ask the district to reimburse you for that evaluation.
But let me really quickly ask you, Bonnie, for your opinion as both a seasoned expert in the field of special education, but also as a mom who's been there and done that. If you've got a team that's good and a team that's willing, but you're not hitting where you need to be academically, would you move to a private school or would you bring in some help for the team that you have in the public school?
The answer to that is it depends. And the it depends has to do with whether the school is still open to having the child be served in the public school, or if the well has been poisoned. I have a 10-year-old girl, she's having a ton of behavior problems. She is sending other kids to the office by doing things like spraying them with hand sanitizer. She's really not like violent or scary, but she's causing a ton of disruption, and the school has turned against her. And so, even though if we could get appropriate behavior support in her classroom, I think it could be successful. I've told her parents that the school has made up its mind about her, and it would be too difficult and not realistic to assume they're going to change their mind anytime soon. And the way the school's treating the child is triggering behavior. So it depends on not only what the needs are, but also what the school climate is.
I love that answer, though. We are out of time, so tell us quickly where we can find you if we want to consult with you. I did send you a mom this week that hopefully I hope you got to connect with.
Yeah,
Um,
she reached
but
out to me and I was thinking about her. I have to find out what happened. I haven't heard back from her. Could you reach out to her again and tell her I'm looking for her?
I did reach back out to her, and she's about to reach back out to you, so we're all good. So, but tell people where to find you.
Yeah, email byates at tollnerlawoffices.com, phone 310-245-1968. You can find me on the Tollner Law Offices website. Everybody have a good week. Thank you, Shannon.
All right, thank you so much, Bonnie.